Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, for those of you who are interested in pursuing goals, dreams, or perhaps just kind of standing in your space and claiming the I am part to let the world know that you actually exist on your own terms, you're going to really be insightful for what you're about to hear today. On the program today, we're going to invite you to free your voice, claim your boundaries, advocate for issues that matter to you, and successfully guide your relationships, especially the one with yourself. Our guest joining us on the program today loves working with people who value their time and energy and want to focus on their strengths. Respect for quality writing and desire for clear communication is why they bring her onto their team. As an expert in self-help, our guest today is joining us with business development books that she's intensely studied in the psychology of those readers, and I know she knows how to call them to action. The title of the book is Don't Tell Me to Calm Down, Face Your Power and Find Your Peace. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Erin Donnelly. Erin, thank you for being on the program today.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you for having me. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, too. That was beautiful.
You go with your feelings like you talk about in your book, and here's the unique thing, and it was really enjoyable as I was reading through your book, and, I think, like me, you, and a lot of other people listening, we've read a lot about self-help. There are a lot of things out there that promise that if we go ahead and follow the steps, the secrets, these sort of things here, we learn to master these things, we're going to have this ideal life and get what we want and be where we want to be and feel the way we believe we want to feel. But the thing is I think what most people are reaching out and pulling these books off the shelf for, and it's just my opinion, is they're trying to find a way to avoid or at least ease pain in pursuit of these things we believe we want. What are your thoughts on that?
I was excited to have this conversation with you because you and I have actually been in this self-help personal growth world, for around the same time, over a decade. I think you've been doing this podcast for 15 years?
Yes, it's definitely that long.
Exactly, yes. And I spent 7 years working at a personal growth bookstore in Portland, Oregon. And after that, transitioned into ghostwriting, specializing in self-help, activism, leadership kind of books. And it's interesting because I think that if I could name one theme throughout that entire time of, exploring all these different teachers and traditions and religions and modalities, what I saw repeatedly is that there was a stifling of people's true feelings and an inability to express them in a way that was satisfying, not only in terms of getting it off your chest, but having it be received in a way that was palatable. And I saw that this was the struggle that somehow wasn't being met in this law of attraction, positivity realm. And it just sort of wasn't being I was like, why aren't we having this conversation? Why aren't we talking more about anger? Why aren't we talking about bitterness and shame and grief? And I know you as an interviewer have gone down those roads. So again, I'm so thankful that we're in this little club together with people who actually find relief and joy and solutions from exploring some of these tough emotions. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I felt that that I and the people who enjoy this book, that we take tough emotions as a sign to explore something deeper in our inner world. And there's so much healing in that, and yet it's messy. And it's complicated, and it's complex, and it requires some humility. It requires critical thinking. And this is the part that the law of attraction and the positivity movement has largely suppressed and ignored. It's just think positive. Just raise your vibration. Just say this mantra. Just, light this green candle for prosperity. And this stuff is just not working for people. And I feel like I know firsthand. I worked at a personal growth bookstore and spoke to people every day about how they were interacting with these products. And the ones who were really, it was so interesting because the ones who were really willing to get honest about what was going on for them were the ones with the true success. So the ones who looked at codependence or addiction or some of these other tougher emotions that we mentioned, anger and guilt, they were the ones that I felt like were able to find the true peace. And they were the ones who were able to become truly present. They were the ones who had the best boundaries. And they were also the ones that were the most compassionate. And so, do you agree, Daniel, that that's what we're shooting for here? Not just this euphoric feeling 24/7. We want to be able to ride the waves.
And I like that you said that. I remember years ago, and I think I was in my early 20s, and I was watching a movie, and all at once I would say that's when I captured my spiritual pursuit. And that was in the direction that the word Zen just simply popped into my head. Just watching it. It was a martial arts movie, and this character in the movie was actually practicing in an old stone city of Thailand. And I just loved that scene, because it was a sound that was searing through his head as he was practicing. He was wondering, where's this coming from? And the word Zen literally just popped into my head. So I began pursuing that and reading it. Now, most Westerners, as they pursue, for instance, the Asian philosophies, and Zen certainly being one of them, or even Zen Buddhism, and there's definitely a difference between the two because Zen is clearly and completely Japanese, but certainly by way of Buddhism is where they captured and began to integrate the philosophy into their own. And so as you begin to pick up these books and read about them, and they tell you sit and you meditate and this and that and the other, I think as you talk about, let's call it this New Age movement, if you want to call it that, where you're in pursuit of that bliss, and there's all these mystical experiences that you read about. And so you believe as you're pursuing this, through meditation and all these books that you're picking up, you're reaching out to find what is this mystical experience. So you begin to create an imaginative way that you think you're having these experiences as you're sitting around all day long, breathing in and out, calming the mind, being clear. When will I experience this? And so you really try to create that for yourself. But in the end, I think like a lot of Westerners, and I certainly have seen over the years since that time, as you go deeper and deeper into it and layers and levels, they begin to actually quit because they're not experiencing what they have believed they will have that they read in these books. And really, they just don't get it. And I think Bruce Lee, his wife Linda Lee, certainly had expressed this. There was a time where she had been given a gift from her husband, Bruce Lee, having no way is way. And she simply said in a documentary that a lot of Westerners pretty much believe that, well, I guess that means I can just go do whatever I want. And yeah, that's true, but it's not completely what he was talking about, having no way is way. In other words, you go and explore and you face each day, each moment, not having a particular way that you do things, but a way that you do things. See, as he would say, Bruce Lee would say, to truly and honestly express yourself in the moment. And that's something that takes a lot of discipline personally that a lot of self-help in that arena really don't truly address direct experience. And that's truly Japanese Zen. That's where the mystical experience resides. And certainly when you're talking about, for instance, as you open up in your book about the person D that you were in the care of or that you were with, there it was. She was truly expressing herself where people around her were saying she was nuts. Let's go ahead and talk about who this person is first.
Mm-hmm. Dee was, I met her, several years ago when I was transitioning with career, transitioning with relationship. I was selling a home of 15 years. I was really trying to find my footing in the world. And I've always loved the topic of death. and studying, what happens and grief. And so I took a class about death in America, and the teacher had a business where she helped people, like you could call her, and she has a team to come in and help you with the death of your loved one. So, she would help with insurance, but she'd also help with, medications and just helping get things set up. But also she had companions for the dying people because the caretakers were often so burned out, whether they be family or, medical people. And she knew that these individuals who were passing away needed some different form of connection. So anyway, I was so lucky to get on her team. Her name is Ann Kaysen, and Ann paired me up with Dee. And Dee had about 6 months to live, and or so we thought. You never know how these things go. She had non-alcoholic cirrhosis of the liver, and she was quite young. I think she was in her mid-60s. And so when I arrived on the scene, her feet hadn't hit the floor in like a year. She was bedbound. She was a very large woman. She had MS. She had all these conditions. And it was just like it was almost like she was wearing her nerves on the outside of her skin. And so, Dee's family was across the country, and the ones that were here were just so burned out, and rightfully so. And so I was hired to spend, 6 to 8 hours a week with Dee. And I would basically sit at the foot of her bed and just chat. I mean, I didn't have to do any caretaking roles. I was just there as a companion. And as soon as I got there, I recognized that everybody around her was sort of superficially trying to make her feel better. She would complain about something, and they'd say, "Oh, just relax. We'll fix it. It'll be fine." And they'd all ask her, though, "How you doing today, Dee? How's it going?" And she would tell them how it's really going. And, "Oh, no, you're going to be fine. It's all good. Just relax. Just relax." And I thought, oh, my God, this is maddening. Not one person is acknowledging that she's got a lot to say. So I basically, for 6 months, sat with Dee and just let her unload about her life. And she was the youngest in her family and the only daughter, and so she talked a lot about having her voice silenced and, having people decide who she should be in the world. And then she talked a lot about her marriage and the struggles there, and again, how, she would even, get a job, and her assertiveness and her wisdom was so often minimized or, requested to be diminished. And it was like she needed to spew about her life and how many times this happened to her. And it's interesting because as she was dying, the details in her stories were just incredible. Like she needed someone to hear every single one of these instances. And at the time, my life was just kind of not going so well. And you would think I would need to be around positive people during this time. People even said to me, "God, Erin, you're going through a rough time and you're choosing to be with a dying woman." Like they thought there was something wrong with me, that I was choosing drama or I was choosing negativity, and how would that ever produce anything good in my life? People would even say to me, why don't you get together with some people who work at Nike or someone in some big corporate position who could maybe give you a leg up, And I was like, no, I'm really enjoying my time with this woman. And the more I heard about the oppression that she experienced through her life, the more I started to understand oppression, and the more I started to learn about social justice and feminism and, and racism and white supremacy in our culture. And I was like putting all the pieces together and coming alive in ways that I couldn't even describe. So my experience with Dee was so powerful because, like you said, she was honestly expressing herself in the moment. And how often do we get to be around people who are doing that? It was like drinking, I was thirsty for it. And I would walk out of there almost like clicking my heels around the corner. I was like, yes, someone's out there telling the truth. It would give me chills. Like, I would laugh so hard sometimes that I would cry. And, and so would she. Like, we would laugh so hard at these ridiculous stories. And I remember thinking, like, I can't remember the last time I laughed so hard that I cried. But with her, I could. And so, you spoke about these blissful, mystical experiences that we're all aiming for, whether it's with, Buddhism or crystal bowl healing or whatever modality, mantras. But to me, I was like, that was bliss. That was the mystical experience, and it transformed my life just being a part of it. So right after that, like, I was getting ghostwriting contracts and, like, I lost 20 pounds and, I was just feeling more alive than ever. And so the story of Dee opens up the book. And, Daniel, I feel like if people just read that story, that's good enough for me. You can put the rest of the book away, because that story alone has been really validating to people. And for me, it just feels so good to have honored Dee as well.
I like that you said that, because a lot of times what you see a lot of as well, we've interviewed and been able to sit with or spend some time with CEOs. We hear a lot of the overrun and overworn cliches and quotes from people. And you actually give a great example of one of them by Einstein.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and start there. Because I got to a point, what are we going to get to a place, any one of us? We don't have to be Einstein. And I'm certain Einstein would stand there in front of us and say, no, I don't want you to be me. I want you to be the best version of you. Now, there was a really great overlooked movie that was out this year, and I kept bringing it up. It was a lot of fun. It was entertaining. It brought tears to your eyes, and it's based on a real story about an English brother and sister who pursue the WWE. That's their long life dream. It's called Fighting with My Family. And it also stars, briefly, in moments of it, The Rock, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And it's about professional wrestling, okay? And there's a moment that they actually get invited to try out for the WWE. They get their dream handed to them, but they have to try out to see if they can get into it. And they come across The Rock, and certainly they're excited, and the both of them are mainly it's the brother talking to The Rock and so forth. And what he simply says is this: don't try to be me, be the best version of you. And that's how you'll succeed, because that's the only way it's going to happen on the WWE. He's simply saying, to be great in this, people have to see your authenticity, your genuineness, as we're talking about here. And, and there it is. It's just that simple. When are you going to find your quote instead of finding everyone else's? So let's talk about that Einstein quote.
Yes. So Einstein famously said, stay away from negative people. They have a problem for every solution. And so, yeah, that just, like, gets me so fired up. When I hear things like that, I just want, like, I feel like it is such a shaming quote. And yet, you see, like you said, CEOs and thought leaders and, Melinda Gates or, name any kind of seemingly innocent, good-natured person, and they're liking quotes like this. So it can be so confusing, and we're thinking, stay away from negative people. Okay, so what does that actually mean? Like, that actually means that we cannot be negative ourselves, or we will be shunned. That's the message that we hear from this. And also this thing of stay away from negative people. So, okay, great. What about someone who is experiencing oppression in the moment? What about, microaggressions and acts of racism and sexism and, hate crimes? Are we supposed to just ignore those and stay silent and walk away? out there, looking for our bliss and rising above the negativity. I mean, so oftentimes those who are experiencing legitimate pain or needing real help, say it's a person experiencing mental illness, walking past your house and having an issue, will think, oh my God, that person's negative. Don't go out there. Don't get near them. I mean, we could actually have an opportunity to interact with these people and learn more about something that we don't know about and impact the world in a much more positive way than just running away from anything that seems negative. And I study a lot about what happens in the workplace because I spent a decade in corporate sales. And, as a young woman at that time, it was in my 20s, right after college, I did really well in sales. But as a woman, I experienced all these things that didn't happen to the men. Like for instance, I would be able to, secure an appointment with like a car dealership in town, and I was selling advertising. And so, he'd say, yeah, the owner would say, yeah, meet me, Friday at 9. So I would call the night before and I'd confirm the appointment, and, I'd get all ready and I'd come out to the dealership at 9, and they'd say, I don't know where he's at. Can you just hold on for a minute? And then I'd sit there for an hour, and then they'd come back and they'd say, yeah, he can't see you right now, and then I'd come back to the office and they'd say, well, did you confirm the appointment? Well, did you show up on time? Well, you must not have conveyed enough importance to him about the meeting. And so it became everything that I experienced that was kind of, screwed up, like, wow, this is so disrespectful. Wow, why don't I matter? I was told that it was my fault in some way and that I couldn't be negative about this. And I have no right to get upset about it. This is business. This is how it goes. But yet my coworkers weren't experiencing that, the men. People were on the whole, their time was being respected. So the whole time, I was trying to understand, well, wait a minute, why is it different for me? And since I grew up in a family with all boys and a conservative household, I was told that sexism doesn't even exist and that women have never had it better in America. And so this stuff was my imagination. And so, again, Aaron, just be positive. Aaron, just rise above. Aaron, fix yourself. And so I see that we're in this time where, hate crimes against people who are not, the norm are so on the rise. And are we just supposed to sit here and be silent about that? And what about when these people, speak out about what's happening for them? Are we just going to tell them to be positive? This is ridiculous. We have to find a way to be able to express ourselves during these heated times and do it in a way so that we can be heard and that we can also have some protection for ourselves. And, there are diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in so many of these corporations because these conversations are always messy. They're always uncomfortable. They don't get solved in one setting. And so you have to bring in outside people to facilitate it because the leaders just can't deal usually because they're so used to enforcing and rewarding those who are positive. I remember in my corporate job, this one woman, her husband passed away, and she was just praised for never shedding a tear at work, for jumping right back in, crushing her sales goals. And I just thought, this is wild. The fact that she could shut off her emotions completely was rewarded. She was called strong for that, professional. It's just wow, it's just such a crazy world that we live in. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I could go off on tangents. Did I answer your question, Daniel?
Well, absolutely. There it is, because we believe we're supposed to get to this place. And I thought it was really unique as I was reading your book that people believe we're supposed to go to a state that we're always in pure happiness all the time. But yet, if you really pay attention, and it even shows this, and you even make suggestions, watch movies about characters and different things and really get broad experiences. is I remember, I think it was in the movie The Firm starring Tom Cruise, there's a moment that they have that success, that Tom Cruise is in a law firm, he's getting paid a bunch of money, and you name it. And there's a point where his wife simply says, what do you say we pretend we're back in our old apartment, we've scraped and found some change or money somewhere, we order a pizza out and we watch a movie? And how often do we hear when people get to that level they believe was supposed to be success, where they've actually attained the big goal, whatever that may be for anybody, and they say, I love those moments when I was struggling. I miss those. Isn't that really a telltale sign that we really like that sort of misery, for lack of a better word?
Because it's bonding. We want to connect with each other, and being able to talk about what's really happening for us, is the way that we come together. But yet there's, in the racial justice conversation, that's why we're hearing about white fragility right now. So when people of color speak about what's really going on for them and the ways that they are oppressed and the ways that, our culture reinforces oppression, on the whole, white people can't deal with it when those conversations happen. And it's called white fragility, when white people cry or say, this is reverse racism, and how dare you accuse me of being a bad person, and, my sister is married to a black guy, and it's just like, no, we need to be able to hear how our words and actions might have been unintentionally caused harm. We need to be able to have these difficult situations and difficult conversations, because that's what actually bonds us as people. And, it's so interesting, Daniel. I just finished a ghostwriting project for a gentleman who just got out of prison, actually. And he spoke in the book about his ties with people who just have incredible economic privilege, billionaires, millionaires, and he aspired to be one of them. It was just everything to him to reach that pinnacle of wealth, because that's where he saw true respect, where he thought that's where you get loved, that's where you get respect, that's where you can really relax as a person. And he said that it was just so delusional, because what he found was that when you have that amount of wealth, the lies that are in your daily orbit are so abundant, it's crazy. So not only are, you being lied to by almost everyone around you, because people are trying to kiss up, they want a little something for themselves, they're telling you how great your speech is, how good you look today. There's that pandering that happens to people of wealth and privilege. And then secondly, they're lying to other people a lot of times, because they're trying to protect this image that they were somehow brilliant enough and worthy enough to be in this extreme position of privilege. So they are lying to others. Others are lying to themselves. And then on the third level, the wealthy person is lying to themselves, again, about they think that they truly start to believe that they have a certain level of self-importance, and that's why they're in this position, or that they're actually way more brilliant than other people, or, way more
Let me
worthy.
stop you right there, because this is a really good point, and I like this about what you're saying here. They get to this level of success, of self-importance, and I want to use two examples. Okay, the first one just recently was regarding Beyonce at a basketball game.
Yes, I know.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk about that one. And for those of you who aren't familiar, she's sitting courtside with her husband, was invited by the owner, if I remember right, of the team, and his wife. His wife's sitting on, I think, the left side of Beyonce, courtside, and Beyonce's husband, I believe it's Jay-Z, sitting on the right. She's talking to the husband, and there seems to be, according to viewers, an irritation Beyonce is having, and then the Beyonce fans, known as the Beehive, I guess, decide to just go on a social media rant about this whole thing. Let's talk about that, because this is right on the money here in some ways. The second one is, and this irritated me, was Meryl Streep accepting an Academy Award and deciding to whine about something Donald Trump had done or had said about somebody who, I guess, had a handicap years ago before he was even running for president. There's two examples. Now, I'm not saying much because Beyonce was just an irritated look. It was more about her fans, so that's one extreme. The other one was somebody personally accepting an Academy Award. I'm an actress, so you should listen to me. Well, I take this stand, and instead of saying thank you, I whine about something somebody did years ago. Let's talk about these things, because this is, I think, right on the money of what you're talking about here.
Great. Let's start with the Meryl Streep one. I'm a little bit unfamiliar about that. So can you just tell me what she was?
She was accepting an Academy Award, and that we live in a world, where somebody says something about somebody who doesn't seem to be.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
It was somebody with a handicap or something. I can't. So we actually went back to see what he had actually done. Because you can find almost, it seems, anything on YouTube. It doesn't mean that it's all of what had happened. But you go and you find these things and realize they're not what these people seem to be blowing them up to be, but the fact that she used the stage that night to talk about something. So she's literally, in my opinion, it's just my opinion again, we live in a world that we're concerned about bullies. Yeah, you should be, but bullying's been around since humankind exists. Okay, you figure it out. But this day and age, it seems the bullies have become the victims of the bullies. The bullies have become the victims of the bullies. Does that make sense? In other words, the people who feel they're being bullied have become the bullies.
I see what you mean.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
So
okay.
let's go ahead.
Let's start there. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, great. So I think Meryl Streep, she was referring to Donald Trump had made fun of a disabled person at one of his rallies. I think that's what she was referring to. Does that serve your memory?
I believe so, and I know that I went back to it. Both my wife and I did, just to see what is this. Anyway, so that's what it was.
Okay, great. So that's what it was.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. So I see it differently in the way that So right now, like in this talk about global oppression, or oppression happening in America, one of the minority groups that struggles and is often unrepresented are people with disabilities, and they get made fun of. They get sort of discarded as important, as not important, and so I believe that I think what was happening for Meryl Streep there, and I can't speak for her directly, is that that this was a cause that she cares about deeply, and that so she saw that the president of our this leader was able to perpetuate this norm of discounting, making fun of something that she really cares about. And so, we talk about her whining about this, but I think that this is where, in the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's about people with privilege, meaning, if you're white, if you have white skin, that, you have privilege in America. If you're, if you have wealth, if you serve a lot of the norms, and you have, so Meryl Streep, she is about as privileged as you can get. And that's not a negative thing. It just means she walks in the world a little easier than other people, that she is not targeted. People don't, she's not pulled over by the cops. She's believed. She's, given more opportunities. So I think for her and for other Hollywood elites, there is a time now about using your privilege. It's called using your privilege for good. So each of them have something that's going on in the world that they care about. And the conversation, again, in these diversity, equity, and inclusion groups is about using your voice to speak up about what matters to you. And so when you said, the people who are bullied become the bully, this is also, what happens with, when people of color talk about how white people are oppressing them. And then people say, hey, that's reverse racism. But actually there's no such thing as reverse racism, because being white, we are in a position of power. So you can't have reverse racism because the power is with the one group. So it's very similar to what Meryl Streep was saying, and like by defending disabled folks and saying that this man in this incredible position of leadership is causing harm by making fun of them and normalizing this, perpetuating this, and I'm going to use my privilege as a prominent white woman to call that out.
Right.
And I think it's their right to do that, and I think that they feel like it's their responsibility to do it. And so we're going to be seeing more and more of that. But I understand, what you're saying, that it's like, wow, can't you just talk about the movie? But it's a tricky time we're in because the leader of our country has rolled back more rights for women. This administration has taken away more rights for women than any of them. And then people, LGBTQ folks, like their rights are going away at a rapid pace. And minorities are feeling more threatened. There's more violence in our country. There's more civil war in our country. And it's all being led by this leader who's, in my chapter 5 of my book, he is the poster child for verbal abuse. We could teach classes about what verbal abuse looks, sounds, and feels like from Donald Trump's Twitter account alone. So that has real consequences in the world. And I think that these celebrities are realizing that, they have to do something, because if they just sit up there on stage and say, oh, my God, thank you, I want to thank my grandma, I want to thank God, I want to thank, this is so great, in a way they're making it about themselves. And that could be viewed as selfish in this day and age when, things are out of control. So that's my 2 cents on that one, Daniel.
Well, yeah, and it wasn't about that, and I agree with you. If Meryl Streep wants to use that as a platform, that's the point. Was getting back to the self-importance that, as you said, these people walk in a realm of privilege. So although they may find that's important, they don't have to really live with the consequences of the people that are experiencing these things. Okay?
That's very true.
Now, let me give you a great example of this. So last night we decided to watch on Netflix. There was an interview, and there's a David Letterman series, My Next Guest, and he interviewed.
I watched one of those last night too. Which one did you see?
And this one was on with Kanye West. And this
Great.
was the first.
I just saw it too.
Oh, did you? Okay. Now I love the discussion they were having, because apparently he has been dealing with bipolar. Okay. And there was a point, and my wife didn't understand it at the time, but we were later talking about it. And here was David Letterman talking about the kind of situation that he was dealing with, and for years he had a physician who was, would you just take the medication, because apparently he had anger and aggression and all that sort of thing. He says, please just do this. And so after 10 years, Dave says he caved in. Now, Kanye had made a comment that I think was actually overlooked by a lot of people that I thought was right on the money, and that was, he says, you got the Ralph Lauren. Now, what he was saying was that at David Letterman, or even in Kanye West's case, is they were allowed to take, the premium medication for a situation like that. That is, this would get in there, it would kind of do the job with very little to almost no side effects, okay? Mm-hmm. And there's the point. So there's these people that can treat these situations at that level they can afford to. And that's the comment that Kanye West was making. I thought it was really sharp and overlooked. And then you realize, but what about all the other people, that have this issue and that can't get the Ralph Lauren, and how we cast them aside as a result of the failing of being able to do that for them, and how things turn out for them. And I'm not trying to turn this into a debate about who gets what and where, but we're back to that idea that you were saying about people who have this feeling of self-importance. Look at me, and this is the way it should be. And the thing is, as I understand your book, Don't Tell Me to Calm Down, is these are those moments that you feel that creeping, crawling, boiling under your skin. That's what you embrace to move you forward.
Yeah, exactly. Let the anger, let the discomfort, let the disappointment, let the rage lead you to discover what's truly going on. Absolutely, yeah. And, that Kanye interview was so interesting to me, too. And I remember hearing what you mentioned about the premium medication. I remember hearing that at the time, and I appreciate you bringing that up. You got the Ralph Lauren medications, you said. Yeah. And so, again, I thought that was a positive statement by Kanye to drive, awareness that there are levels of help that are received, based on how much money you have. And so, like what happens again in this sort of self-help new agey world is that somebody with economic privilege might go to a vision board workshop and make this great vision board about what they want to see happen in their lives. And then, oh my God, they have the money to actually make it happen, hire the people, buy the products, take the trip, get the coach, and then all of a sudden they've manifested what was on their vision board, and they achieved that magical experience that we were talking about later, and then all of a sudden they think that they are like, oh my God, I did it right. Oh my God, the universe rewarded me. Oh Lord, look at this power that I have. If I only make a vision board. And then, and then they start to become revered for their ability to manifest. And then they start teaching workshops on manifestation. And, hey, if you just think like me, if you just see it, believe it, put it up there, hey, it happens. And then these people become revered. And this is like the Tony Robbins. This is these kind of like level of leaders. And we think, man, they really have this figured out. But yet a person who does not have that economic privilege, maybe does not have, that color skin or the gender to make that happen, or the physical abilities or the mental capabilities, they're viewed as less than because their vision board didn't take them where they needed to go. Oh, they must not have been positive enough. Oh, they must not have. You see, so there's like this judgment of those who just sort of can't make things happen for themselves, and, they just don't know how to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And so many of the time, the people whose vision boards are manifesting are rich people, and we're just not saying that. And we need to say it more, especially when you're in this, realm of entrepreneurs. Rich country club wives are becoming life coaches, telling people how to, just think positive to get their business dreams off the ground. It's like, no, that woman was completely funded. It's just like, it's so insane to me that we're not having honest conversations about what's really going on. And, the positivity movement started with a man named Norman Vincent Peale. And he has perpetuated a type of positivity that is like completely oppressive, that is continually dismissing the truth, dismissing reality, dismissing what's happening right in front of our eye, and just saying, look at it differently, look at it positively. And it's dangerous at this point, and that's exactly what's happening, with our leaders in the country right now. It's hard not to get political whenever we're seeing a denial of reality and truth every single day.
So that being said, that brings us back to the situation with the Beyonce in courtside. And I kind of sat there wondering, okay, how did people misinterpret? And I really don't know. But this is a woman who brought herself up to prominence, enjoying a game, and we really don't know what the interaction was between this other man's wife and her husband. Apparently it could have just been friendly conversation. Maybe she just wanted to watch the game. Who knows? But that all her fans decided to protect her through social media.
Right. Yeah.
Now let's take a look at that situation there.
Great. I would love to. Okay. So Beyonce is sitting in between Jay-Z, her husband, and the owner, a white woman from, she was the wife of the team owner, I think it was. And so, that woman leans over and says to Jay-Z, "Can I get you a drink?" And you can see him, you can see his lips moving. He says, "Yeah, I'll have a vodka soda," or something like that. And there's sort of like Beyonce makes a face and kind of like sits back in her chair, And, I mean, if you didn't have the context of what was going on, you would absolutely think this woman was sort of like, hey, Jay-Z, you're looking great today. Hi.
Sure.
And then Beyonce was like, oh, I'm over this woman. I'm leaning back. Like, get out of here, sister. And so, without the context, but then once people, like could read his lips, it was like, oh, okay, here's the reality of the situation. But I think what we saw on social media was something that is, again, like this is another messy, complex, uncomfortable conversation, is that white women notoriously have been talking over black women. There's a lot of, like, in women's groups right now, we're learning about how white women, like for instance with the pay gap, like white women make something like 80 cents on the dollar compared to men, and black women make like 70 cents on the dollar. And so black women are saying, like, hey, white women, like, we're in this, feminist movement together. Why aren't you making sure that we're at your level before you start trying to move yourself ahead? So there is this sort of like calling out from women of color to white women to say, hey, listen, like, you need to be doing better. Like, you need to watch, like when women of color have confronted women in the workplace, especially about like, hey, what you did wasn't fair. There's a lot of backstabbing and gossiping and, underhanded manipulation that goes on, because there's only one seat at the CEO table for a woman, and that's often a white woman.
Right.
And so women of color, I'm so thrilled to hear them like be able to express like, nope, not in this day and age. Like, white women, you need to know what you're doing. You need to understand how you're causing harm and how you're minimizing us. And like, again, these conversations don't feel good at first. And like sometimes they get totally out of control, like this Beyonce thing. Like these, I mean, like black women came out with like pissed off at that woman. And sure, it went too far, but it kind of opened this conversation about like, well, why does that reaction even take place? Because the underground conversation is that white women have been unkind to women of color historically for a very long time, and there's been a denial of it. And so now we as women get to sit there at the table and hear about how we unintentionally sometimes cause harm to each other. And so we now have a chance to get on the same page and learn how we can work together better, and, who we choose as our leaders and how we frame things, and, kind of get free together. And so, again, like I love this time that we're in because it's so heated, Daniel. And I think that, like, the more that we can just say, like, oh, like, what's happening here? And what don't I understand about this situation? What's in it here is there anything here for me to learn? And so it's really cool because we get to, there's this quote that I love, is that as a writer, you try to listen to what others aren't saying, and then you write about the silence.
I like that one because I remember years ago when I was with the PBS network, there was a woman that I had interviewed who wrote a book on how to listen. And she brought up Martin Luther King, and that changed me in that moment when I heard this, that Martin Luther King listened to what you didn't say. And I thought, wow, that's pretty profound there. I'd never heard that one before. And I began to try to listen intentionally, much like Martin Luther King would. And I thought, that really changed me, because anybody can say whatever they want to, and believe me, I've been in conversations where people were interested in our radio show and our business, and they would tell me, I viewed your website, so forth and so on, and I really love what they do. Now, what you're hearing is the ego being stroked, and you also know that they're looking for something. So I would ask simple questions. Well, what about our website did you like? What about our show did you like? What didn't you like? And you'd be astounded how often they'd get tongue-tied and trip and fall and try to be vague and ambiguous on how to answer that question, which tells me they didn't bother looking at it at all. They might have popped it up just to see if it was on the Internet, for all I know. But that's as far as they went. And I love that this conversation toward the end of the show here has led to this situation with Beyonce and the clarity you bring about what your book truly is about, and that is this, that if everybody got a rise, they reacted in this Beyonce situation. Again, like you said, now, if she was leaning back in the chair, this would be the way I would view it, would be, how many times have you sat between two people talking to each other and you just simply leaned back so that they could do that? Really.
Yes.
And I didn't see the whole thing, but I wondered, okay, now here's all the fans of Beyonce getting a rise. And that's really what we're saying here in the show, a very good thing. Why is it getting a reaction and a rise out of you that Beyonce is in this situation? See, there's the motivation. I say, if you really want to, and your book clearly defines this, it's the theme of it, is this. Whenever you have a reaction to anything happening in your world at any given moment of time, and Bruce Lee would say this is truly, honestly, the moment you get to express yourself. You pursue what that is. You question, what is this that's upsetting me? Pick up a People magazine or, something about where we get to view the stars out there playing with all their money. I know I sat in bed one day years ago. My wife said, "You're sick here. Go ahead and read this." And at 20 minutes of it, I felt worse than I did before I picked up the magazine. Who are these people that have all these problems, all this money they have? And I realized as I started working on the crossword puzzle, I started feeling at ease, when I should have been sitting there continually feeling uneasy and examining these reactions that I was having, stepping up, learning about myself, where do these things come from, and how can I begin to experience these things differently for my own personal growth? That's specifically what your book is talking about, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes, sort of how to have a better relationship with your inner emotions and learn how to work through them yourself. And kind of be okay with how you feel and not run away with it. There's a whole section in the book about, the importance of alone time and how to demand it for yourself. But also once you're there, I give a bunch of different suggestions on, how to work through heartbreak and guilt and anger and disappointment and shame. And, I'm not an expert in this, Daniel, but I made sure that I included my favorite teachers and my favorite leaders in this, in this kind of work and more of these shadow work kind of areas. And the book is fun. The book is I call it it's called an airplane read. It's only 150 pages. You could read it in 2.5 hours if you needed to. And,
which is where a lot of the really good books are anyway.
So
the ones
true.
that really you can read in 2 hours are usually the best ones for you.
Yes,
My
and
opinion.
as a ghostwriter, I specialize in airplane reads because, even sometimes it's harder to write a concise and powerful book. But I think that those are the ones that really pack a punch because they don't waste people's time. And that's the thing. I just care so much about my own time and having it be honored and honoring it for others too. And so I hope your listeners will pick up the book. It's fun. There's poetry, there are music lyrics, there are tools and exercises. And,
great quotes by Donald Trump.
Yes, there's a whole section on how to understand verbal abuse and how we react to it as a culture and how you can start noticing it in your own life. Because the truth of the matter is, that we can't do anything about how the president is talking, but we can use our reactions from his words to ask, okay, where is this happening in my own life? Who do I know who speaks to me this way? And more importantly, when have I been the one to speak to others this way? Why have I chosen this form of communication? What kind of harm does it do? And how can I transform this so that I can speak in a way that's safer and kinder, not only for myself, but others? And so that's chapter 5 of the book. And that's actually the section that means the most to me. So thank you for letting me talk about that.
Well, and there it is. We're talking about how people can actually empower themselves, and I think you become more personally empowered as you explore your reactions to things. And most of the time, the reactions you have are negative ones. I mean, how many times do you react to something truly positive? You may think, oh, that's nice, but then you move on to the next thing. But boy, when it's something negative, like something that our president said that probably sounded profoundly stupid, or as I brought up earlier, something Meryl Streep had done, that I felt at that time, what are you using this form, to do this? But then again, I personally examined, well, why did I react to that? Maybe I was reacting because she was somebody of privilege who says, maybe I love to help and to have compassion for the handicapped community, even though I'm detached and I live this way. See, it's sort of the star has the money so they get to solve the problems, or they don't have any problems. But the fact is, as I looked into that personal reaction I had, anybody who's read a biography on anybody realizes most of these people did not have an easy road. In fact, their road was harder because they stood in the light of the fact that they were against a lot of odds. Most of them, if not all of them, did. All of them did. And as you read these biographies, you start thinking to yourself, do I truly want this desire that I think I want? Because I don't know if I want to go down that road. There's no guarantees. That's the beauty that I love about reading biographies and autobiographies. They show you the real whole story most of the time. And I've certainly interviewed a lot of these people as well. And so earlier, and my suspicion is this, when you talk about the positive movement, is how often have we heard people who have perhaps gained their new spirituality, as they like to call it? And that's great, you're finding a path. But they play around in it, and they step, get their toes in the water a little bit. Nobody really seems at that moment. They love the romantic side or the honeymoon side of that pursuit. Then you hear something like, well, it didn't work out, so I guess it just wasn't meant to be.
The universe had other plans for me, they'll say.
Right. But I say, look, I can show you a lot of biographies and autobiographies of people that had a desire, a dream, and it didn't work out, and they said, but it was meant to be, so I'm going to do what it takes. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and go through what's necessary to get to where I want to go. Because it was meant to be, because it was the gift, it was the idea that was planted, it was the seed inside of me for me to pursue it. And that's why I like your title, Don't Tell Me to Calm Down, because that's where the real work in character building comes.
Yes, and what I hear and what you're describing there is that it also, not only is there determination, like, no, this is my goal, no, this is my dream, but also there's a sense of humility in realizing, like, no, this is going to be tough. No, I'm going to get knocked down. No, I'm going to have doubts. You have to find a way to be humble through this process. And I think the positivity movement and the law of attraction and all of that stuff, you become your own God with that. And so there's this, like, I'm invincible, I'm positive, I'm happy, I'm manifesting, I'm. And it's unhealthy. But yet when you take a step back and realize, like, I'm going to get knocked down, but I'm going to keep reconnecting to this thing that's important to me, or I'm going to screw up, and I'm going to find out how I can do better. That sense of humility is lost, and even, like, think about, Don Miguel Ruiz, the 4 Agreements, like that one of, like, don't take things personally.
Right,
so
I agree.
Helpful in a lot of ways, but yet that people will have will do something in pursuit of their dreams and be schooled for it or shamed for it or realize they made a mistake, and they'll say, you know what, I'm just not going to take it personally. It's not about me. And so they don't learn anything from what just happened. They say, I'm just going to raise my vibration, think positively, and realize that's the other person's problem. And I'm saying, like, no, like, don't surpass that. Stay there, find the lessons, find where you might have been accountable in some way, and then move forward. So yeah, I'm so glad that we have a shared passion for this, Daniel. I really have enjoyed this conversation. And I want to say too that like, you talk about, reading biographies and learning from other people's experiences, but I love that you brought up the Meryl Streep and the Beyonce situation, because this is what's in front of our face every day. And, we think like, oh, why am I getting mad over something on Twitter? That's not even real life. Well, you know what? It is real life because it
Yeah,
has an
if you
effect on
react to it, it's totally real.
Yeah, no matter how minimal, or, you know, people say like, oh, you know what, I'm not getting involved in politics because it's too negative. Well, you know what, you're missing a lot of opportunity for growth.
Absolutely.
And you're screwing up as an American. You know, it's like, so, I feel like this book is more relevant than ever, and I'm learning every day how to do better myself. And so inviting others on this journey, it's like, you know, you could sit around waiting for the world to change, or you can realize how you're actually the one causing some of the harm and dysfunction yourself.
The ultimate thing, too, is I love what you talk about, and it's a very underlying theme is this, and I realized that once this happened in my life, as we just have about 2 minutes left, is the more you take personal responsibility for everything that happens around you, the easier life does get. That doesn't mean you won't have hardship, but it does get easier once you just take that simple step. And we had talked with, I think it was Yen Liu, who actually wrote about the Hawaiian Ho'oponopono. And, you know, this is the idea, you know, thank you, I love you, please forgive me. You know, it's about Ho'oponopono is what it is, and how you take direct responsibility for all the situations you find yourself in. And I was really amazed, once you start doing that, life really gets easier. You don't say, well, that shouldn't have happened. You say, well, it's happening, I'm in it, okay, what about this? You know, and you get those opportunities to strengthen your resolve. I mean, your soul was given everything it needs. But we keep thinking that when we don't see things going our way, or we're not getting what we want the way we want it right away, that there's something wrong. And I think the first thing is to quit saying that. Everything you get in life, you've asked for.
Oh, but you know what? I will say, though, is that, you know, I think that I like considering that in some situations, but then it ignores, you know, like say that, you know, like you've been the victim of abuse or discrimination. Did you bring that on yourself?
No, that's not what I mean. What I'm saying is that you say, okay, I'm in this. I mean, you're in it. That's just all there is to it. The question is, what do you do next?
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like you could sit there and be like, God, I keep getting put into this, you know, position of discrimination, and I keep getting my power taken away. Or you could figure out how to take back your power in those situations, or how to remove yourself when you need to. I mean, there's still going to be victimization that happens.
Sure.
But, yeah, again, thank you so much for today. This
you
was
bet,
really
Erin.
fun.
And listen, where is a website people can find out more about your work, or how they might be able to pick up the book, things like that?
Yes, it's at erindonley.com, and that's ERINDONLEY.com. And the book's available on Amazon, and it's basically available anywhere books are sold online. So Barnes & Noble, or, you know, whatever indie bookstore you have, call them up, and it's available through Ingram. So thank you.
You bet. And the book is Don't Tell Me to Calm Down. Our guest today, Erin Donnelly. Erin, thank you for being on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Such a pleasure, Daniel. Thanks for all you do.
You bet. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can discover more at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We do encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter. Keep up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50, as well as our upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.